this story is remarkable, right? Like, it's been leaked by so many different sources that Florian Wirtz and Leverkusen not only are close to agreeing a contract, but that in fact that contract has already been signed. Kicker then runs it, right? That Wirtz has signed a new contract, and then Leverkusen make a statement saying that they cannot confirm the story, but they're not denying it either. Which makes me think, this is my theory about this entire thing, Stefan, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think the story is true that Wirtz has signed a new contract, but they probably want to announce it on a big stage, possibly even the last home game of the season. Not
Yeah.
season, year. That's
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I was reading that they might be waiting until 2025 to announce it, so that when it becomes when it comes into effect, I suppose. Yeah, it's a great story, in the sense of the Bundesliga keeping another young player. We'll have to wait and see whether it's a case of them keeping another young player, or it's a case of them signing a deal and getting their ducks in a row to anticipate big offers for such a young player. I still think there's a big light blue storm cloud on the horizon by the names of Manchester City, which I think Leverkusen are anticipating, because they kind of, if you allow me to mix my metaphors, I do kind of think the stars are aligning here, in the sense that Manchester City are going to spend an absolute fortune in January and then in the summer, because obviously their team's falling apart, and crucially the positions where that team is falling apart is in the number 10 position, the inside forward positions. They need long-term replacements to Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, a player out left. So obviously you can see Florian Wirtz playing in those positions. And I haven't really got to the bottom of this one yet. I haven't really started picking up the phone and making phone calls yet, but I'm intrigued to see if this was a deal to say, yes, he's definitely staying, or is it a deal to say, we sign a new contract, and when he goes, he'll go on our terms, and we'll be laughing our way to the bank when he does sign a contract with a Real Madrid or a Manchester City or whoever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. It's just so, in such a lovely story as well. He obviously feels a degree of loyalty to Leverkusen, which is so refreshing. After everything they've done for him in terms of getting him through his rehabilitation, develop him as a young player as well. And there's obviously something at Leverkusen that players definitely appreciate. I remember when I was there to interview Xabi Alonso last year, and I was speaking to, I forgot his name now, but he's more or less one of their scouts, or helps run the academy. And we were talking about how Kai Havertz came through at the club, and at the time I think he was still at Chelsea, or maybe he'd just made the move to Arsenal, and there's a lot of discussion about what his best position was. And the topic basically got down to this guy saying, no, at Leverkusen we figured out what his best position was, and we turned him into a top class player in that position. And he was taking quite a bit of what's the word? Just a disgruntlement at the fact that these Premier League clubs couldn't really figure out what to do with this player, which they obviously cherished for so long. And that's a discussion about Kai Havertz, and it's not really relevant to this. But I think what is relevant is that Leverkusen are very, very good at signing these players and kind of wrapping themselves around them and really developing them into fantastic young players. And I think the players really appreciate that too. Obviously Florian Wirtz does. He's obviously gone on to do great things with them. It's no doubt that that's because of Xabi Alonso and the kind of culture that he's brought to the club, and that kind of winning mentality that he's brought to the club. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here, because I just think the sky's the limit for Florian Wirtz. I honestly think when I watch him play football this season, and I've seen him do it time and time again, he just takes games by the scruff of the neck and wins them, and he does it over and over and over again for Leverkusen. And I know he's not playing for a big club. I know he's not doing it for Bayern Munich or Chelsea or Manchester United or whatever, but it's almost more impressive that he's doing it for his Leverkusen team, who at times only have like two forwards on the pitch. And he can just say, look, give me two wing backs, give me a half-fit Victor Boniface, and I'll still find a way to win these games. And it honestly does remind me of Lionel Messi, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. He has that ability to just win these games on nothing. And I think Leverkusen know how good he is, and I think they realise that when they do come to sell him, it's going to be, an astronomical amount of money. A world record maybe, or definitely a Bundesliga record. Can't remember what the highest fee is paid in the Bundesliga, but it's and so yeah. I mean, I don't know. What does this mean? He'll be staying here next season? I'm not entirely sure. I think from what I've been told,
I think so.
From what I've been told before, and this isn't really anything to do with this kind of cycle of news, so things could have changed. But what I was told was it all comes down to what Xabi Alonso was doing. And if Leverkusen maybe can bring in someone like Sebastian Hoeneß to replace him, then yeah, maybe that's good enough to keep people like Florian Wirtz, because it shows a degree of ambition. But I think we'll have to kind of see what happens with Xabi Alonso next season before we kind of really draw a line under the Wirtz thing. But what I think I probably can also say is he's almost certainly not got to Bayern Munich.
No. And I do think he is going to stay until 2026. I think this new contract pretty much guarantees it. So, from what I've gathered and from what I've been told by people who are close to the family, is that that's the goal, to keep him there until the World Cup in 2026 and see what he can then do as a World Cup. That's the number one thing for them and the family, that he gets the best preparation for that tournament. That World Cup is in North America. We all know what Julian Nagelsmann's ambitions are with this Germany team. I think Wirtz and Musiala, both of them are very much aligned. And so if that tournament ends up like Nagelsmann envisions, then I think Wirtz can basically decide himself where he's going to go next. That's just the bottom line. So, yeah.
No, I completely agree with you. It's great news, and it's good news for the Bundesliga that we're talking about these players staying rather than moving on. Talking about Xavi Simons, Jamie Levlin, talking about Florian Wirtz today, Paul Vanner, obviously, hopefully get his shot at Bayern Munich next season. It's great that we can do these transfer shows talking about these players staying around rather than just a constant stream of who's going to Manchester City in January.
But the one thing is then becomes really interesting, because if Wirtz isn't going to Bayern need to make sure that Vanner is coming back. That's the obvious one. People are saying like, oh, who are Bayern going to sign if they can't sign Wirtz? I'm like, how about not signing anyone and developing the guy that you have? And I sound like a broken record because I keep saying that over and over again, but they're paying 70 million euros a season for their academy. They just signed this development deal with Unterhaching. On paper, they're very serious about developing their own players. So maybe actually do it, And I think it would be actually quite a great symbolism if the guy that's going to shine next to Musiala when he signs his new contract at Bayern Munich is actually a guy from the own academy as well. And I think, the bottom line of that is that is, something that I think Bayern Munich needs to focus on now, because the Wirtz is off the table, isn't he? So it's time to move on and secure your future in other ways. And I think Paul Vanner has to be pretty much part of that story. And we underlined why earlier in the podcast. So yeah, I think it's It's all very interesting. There's there was lots to unpack, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see what the next few days, weeks bring, if Florian Wirtz gets announced.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we'll continue to kind of dig into that. I'll see if I can find anything else out from Leverkusen as to his future, with or without a new contract. But yeah, for now, it's very encouraging.